times when there's just like a perfect storm of everything to make a great movie, and this is one of them. Like the concept we've talked about on a couple episodes ago, like super cool, like jousting movie that it's more of like a modern like sports vibe. Like We Will Rock You was in the trailer. Like the trailer itself,
the opening
set
scene
this thing
as We Will Rock You.
Yeah, the opening scene is amazing. It's like obviously the actors are great. Heath Ledger is dynamite as the lead in this, and it's so fun and so funny and so
Welcome back to the Movie Dads Podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Howie.
Kyle.
That is Kyle. Kyle, we're back. Episode number 44 of the Movie Dads Podcast. Special episode, Kyle. It is our 1 year anniversary of recording this podcast. We have made it a full trip, a full 365 days, and 44 episodes of talking about nerd crap.
Did you think when we did our first episode, did it even cross your mind that this would be something we would do for a year? I didn't even think about it like that, of like, oh, this is something it's going to be a part of our lives, but it has been. And we've been pretty good at getting it done.
We have. I mean, 44 episodes means we missed 8, right? And it's not like we just missed 8. We just had like longer gaps in between episodes. And, you know, that was kind of when we were flying by the seat of our pants and didn't really have a set schedule.
No idea what we're doing. So
we still don't. So
this is true. But we're here. We're 44 episodes in. We're 1 year down. 45 to go, guys. Welcome to the Movie Granddads Pod.
The Movie Granddads Podcast. But if you're watching us on YouTube, please click that like and subscribe. And if you're not watching us on YouTube, hopefully you're listening to us on one of many podcast networks such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, not Google Podcasts, soon to be YouTube Music, and Podcast Index. You can also see some of our short clips and videos on social media at Movie Dads Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. But you can also catch new episodes every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time for your end of the week driving experience or listening at work.
Yeah.
But because it is our 1 year anniversary special, we have a couple of surprises. Our first one being that our There Can Be Only 5 list is actually going to be our top 10 best movies of all time. Which was a tough list to come up with.
Wait, time out.
Yep.
Top 10 greatest movies we've ever seen.
The greatest movies we've ever seen.
That's how I think what you just said are two very different things.
Do you think best and greatest are two very different things?
Not those two words specifically, though technically yes. But that best movies that you've ever seen compared to best movies of all time, I think that lines up pretty accurately, but also like they're never. It's a little bit more tricky than you think. At least when I was going through my list, I was like, "Fuck!" It's a movie that I've seen that is the best ever.
10 greatest movies of all time and 10 favorite movies of all time are two different
also
lists.
Very different things. Yes, this whole thing was hard. This whole thing was difficult. Schindler's List did not make my top 10, and that is arguably one of the 10 greatest movies of all time. But I've never seen it, and it's not on my list.
Have you ever seen Schindler's List?
No. At what point in my life would that have been a movie that came up of like, I'm going to sit down and watch that and cry? I just haven't. I haven't.
All right, fair enough.
We're on a Movie Dads podcast, and I haven't seen one of the like generally ranked top 10 movies of all time by the world. Whatever. Moving on.
Our first segment, as normal, would be we're movie dads, we've got movie kids, but instead of telling stories this week, we've got some surprise guests.
Yes, we do.
With it being 1 year anniversary of the Movie Dads podcast, we thought what better guests to have this week than the kids that call us movie dads. So our first guest today, is Desmond, my 7-year-old. So the question we're asking all of our kids, Des, what is your favorite movie and why?
My favorite movie is probably Spider-Man No Way Home because it's a really good movie when all the Spider-Mans just go together and they try to defeat the monsters and stuff. And a funny part that I like is that it's not really an action, but when they all are at the Statue of Liberty, they have a Captain America shield, which is funny.
It is, and they fight on top of it, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's your favorite movie. Who's your favorite Spider-Man out of all of them?
Probably the main Spider-Man.
Tom Holland, you like him?
Yeah.
The MCU Spider-Man?
Yeah.
That's okay. I understand. Well, thanks for telling me what your favorite movie is, Des. Appreciate it. All right, and our second guest tonight is Reagan, my newly 13-year-old daughter, who's the only one of our movie kids who's been on the podcast before. Because if you listen to the podcast on Spotify or Apple, you hear her voice introducing us every week. So welcome, Reagan.
Hi.
What is your favorite movie and why?
Well, my favorite movie is definitely Bohemian Rhapsody because it's a biopic about my favorite band, and it's super informational and educational and sad but also happy at the same time. It's really good, and Rami Malek won best actor of the year, so that too with the good acting and stuff.
Oh, so that's a good choice. So other biopics that you like, or is that just the top of the top for you?
That's the top of the top, but I really like The Dirt about Motley Crue.
Oh my gosh.
And definitely Oppenheimer too, of course.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
But you're more of a horror movie buff, right?
Yes, yeah.
Good. So what's your favorite horror movie?
That's really hard to decide.
Oof. What about franchise? Is that easier to answer?
Yeah, I really like the Scream franchise, for sure.
Nice. Excellent. Yeah. Awesome. Well, obviously, we've talked about how you got to meet Matthew Lillard and Skeet Ulrich before, so that definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Thanks for joining us, Reagan. It was good to hear from you.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Movie Dads podcast. This is my oldest son. Hey, stop clapping. We can hear that.
I'm just so excited.
You're so excited. Okay.
Yeah,
well, we are live right now, videoing. So this is my oldest son, Grayson. Grayson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Dad. Thank you.
So we thought it would be fun for our 1 year anniversary to bring our kids on to ask them a big question. What is your favorite movie? So Grayson, what is your favorite movie of all time, or a movie that you really, really like to watch?
Okay, so my favorite movie that I like to watch is the Ghostbuster movie. It's number 3, I think. Was it number 3?
It is number 3. Well, yeah, it's number 3. Well, technically it's 4. I
love the Ghostbuster 4 because it has ice, a demon ice ghost.
That's perfect.
So,
your mom's gonna love hearing you talk about a demon ice ghost from Ghostbusters. Well,
but the demon ghost fought a human, was actually the first human they saw. He thought it was the Fire Master, and they took him out, but it turns out he wasn't actually the Fire Master.
Great. That is actually a very great callback. We just talked about the Ghostbuster movie on a couple episodes ago. What's your favorite part about the Ghostbusters, you goofball?
My favorite part's about to end where all my favorite parts were like Slimer like what's this? Like give me your PJ.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome. Okay. That's awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast, buddy. We're going to pass it on to your little brother. Let's bring him on next.
Before we stop, I just want to ask something.
Okay, ask. Okay, go. We'll put that on the blooper reel. Go grab your brother. Just had Grayson in on the podcast, and now bringing my second oldest, Parker, in to ask what Parker's favorite movie is. So, Parker, welcome to the Movie Dads podcast. You've heard about it a bunch. Now you're on it. Can you look at the camera for me, buddy? So look at the screen. There you go. So Parker, tell me, what's your favorite movie that you've watched?
Lego Batman.
Lego Batman?
Yeah.
Okay, love that. What's your favorite part about Lego Batman?
Where Batman tricks the Joker.
Where Batman tricks the Joker? That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Do you have any other movies that might be your favorite too? What? What's another movie that you like?
X-Men.
X-Men. Well, that's a TV show, but I'll take it because we've been talking a lot about the X-Men. Who's your favorite X-Men?
Storm.
Storm? Okay, yeah. Usually you say Morph. Usually you say Morph is your favorite, but Storm is pretty cool too. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast, buddy. It was super awesome having you, okay? That, man, those little guys and gal, they're just hilarious. I was dying as we were filming that with them.
Yeah, Des is like, Grayson, we're going to be YouTube famous.
Yes, son. All 5 listeners.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Parker, when he started talking, he's like the sound of a mouse. So, like, I just couldn't help him. I could just die laughing. So, I'm glad we got them on the pod. Now you guys know some of the little monsters that cause these bags under my eyes. So,
absolutely.
But that brings us to our and my most excited segment, our 6 to midnight. These are the things that get us up in the morning for this week. So in terms of new nerd news, things we're excited about this week, you know, whether that's a trailer or a new game or a new movie release or whatever that might be, or an old game. Or just anything in the world that has me excited. And for me this week, it's WrestleMania. Brother! WrestleMania 40 was this past weekend, and I'll say it was the greatest WrestleMania of all time. We got Return of the Undertaker, we got Return of the Rock, and then we got our Lord and Savior, Cody Rhodes. Finally got his moment in the sun. They screwed him last year at WrestleMania 39 where he thought he was going to get the title. I love Cody Rhodes because he's a nerd like me. He likes the same nerdy video games. He lost his father. His father was like a legend in the WWF world, or wrestling world, and he never won a title. So Cody Rhodes finally got to go and win that title for him. And what goes with WrestleMania comes my other favorite nerdy thing. WWE 2K24 video game dropped 2 or 3 weeks back, but I waited till WrestleMania week to buy it. And they do a showcase mode in these 2K games, which is essentially they pick either a specific person or timeline or time frame, and you just relive famous moments, matches, stories from that time. Like one year they did Stone Cold. You got to do all the Stone Cold famous matches through his career, which was fucking cool. This year is 40 years of WrestleMania. So you just are playing some of the most famous wrestling matches of all time. Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat versus Macho Man Randy Savage at WrestleMania 3. Like, just epicness. So I've been nerding out. I don't watch wrestling that often. I just watch a pay-per-view here and there. And then WrestleMania gets me juiced every year. But yeah, that's my nerd news. It's not movie related, but we are talking about Johnny Cage for Mortal Kombat with Cody Rhodes. So I just thought I'd bring that up.
Who you wanted to be Johnny Cage.
I'm just going to speak it into existence is pretty much what's happening. So
yeah, but we both have feelings for Carl Urban. So, I mean, it could be worse.
He is Bay. He is for sure Bay.
He's on a Mount Rushmore somewhere of underappreciated nerd culture.
Yeah, for sure.
So I just had a couple things. There was some movie news that came out this week that kind of got me excited, and some that didn't get me excited. So the first thing was there was a first image release of upcoming Maggie Gyllenhaal's doing a movie entitled The Bride, which is a version of Frankenstein. It's coming out this October. And Christian Bale himself is playing the monster. And we got a first image. If you haven't seen the pictures, definitely check them out online. And then Jesse Buckley's playing the bride. Pretty cool, pretty modernized, a little different. Almost got like a tattooed kind of version of the monster, which it's different.
He looks
but
nasty. He does nasty, like in a good way.
But it's Christian Bale, so it's going to be dynamite. So
I just had a conversation with my wife about Christian Bale as I was going through my top 10 list. Obviously, there were multiple movies that I brought up that she's like, are you doing a top 10 list? Or are these just Christian Bale movies? You're in love with him. I'm like, he's incredible. I didn't. You think I just gave away my list. I didn't. Believe it or not, I changed things up because I had like a nerd boner that was a little bit too strong. So I had to tamper that down a bit. So
fascinating. So that one was, I thought was kind of exciting. Then there was an interview Robert Downey Jr. did. And I know I saw the article in Variety, but they had asked him if he would ever return to the Marvel Universe. And he said, absolutely. It's in my DNA. I would never bet against Kevin Feige. He's always going to win. And if the situation was right, I would absolutely do it. Obviously, with what they've been talking about lately with like Secret Wars coming up with the Avengers Secret Wars and possibly bringing in like alternate universe characters, could we see the return of Iron Man in a different version? Because there's a lot of talk about with the promotional art that's come out from Fantastic Four so far. We just got a new like kind of artist rendering for Human Torch like on April 4th, and it looks very much like a different kind of city, like a futuristic kind of design. And there's a lot of chatter going around about how Fantastic Four is going to take place in its own entire universe. Like it's not anywhere near the current MCU. And it's going to take place in its own world. And so the thought is, we got different versions of stuff, which came out some casting news from that movie that Julie Garner is going to be playing Silver Surfer. And she's probably most famous from playing in Ozark.
She's actually more famous for her soundbite from, I believe it is from Ozark, when she goes, if you're going to stop me, you're going to have to kill me. Which is the F-bomb, but
just effing kill me. Yeah.
Yeah. So, which someone like that soundbite was playing over like a picture of her as like casted as Silver Surfer. I was just like, oh my God.
Right. And so she's going to play a version of Silver Surfer that's known as Shala Ball, which is a female version of Silver Surfer in the comics, which is from a different universe than the main Marvel continuity. So Maybe
that's where they're going.
But they did confirm that obviously we're getting Silver Surfer, so our big bad is Galactus.
Dun dun dun.
Which hasn't been cast yet, but the rumor was that Marvel wants Javier Bardem to play Galactus.
Oh, Javier Bardem, the
And,
fucking best creepy bad guy there was.
I'll never be able to see him do it again. Is something from Dune 2, you know, where he's like, as it is written.
Listen, guy.
Never see him the same again.
I saw so there was someone did like a cartoon, you know, like where Batman smacks Robin. It was like it was him smacking Zendaya was saying like he is not, and he's like as it is written, as he's smacking her. Like, it's just like great.
That's pretty good. And then the last bit of news that came out that I sent to you, and I didn't know how I wanted to feel about it, but apparently Warner Brothers is going to move forward with a Matrix 5 that's going to be written and directed by Drew Goddard. The Wachowskis are going to be pushed out. They're going to move on and do their own thing.
They did Matrix 4.
They did 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Does anyone remember 4?
Mm-mm.
That's because no one should remember 4.
Right.
It was, well, 1, maybe I just, the whole like making
Matrix
him...
1, Matrix 2, Matrix 3, and I'm stepping on Matrix 4.
Yeah, it's not even in the building. I get it. Like, they were bringing it back. It's a franchise that we all fucking nerd out about and love. But like it just looked like John Wick in the Matrix. Like, he didn't change his look at all. He just went from like his John, which that wasn't why the movie was bad, but it was the thing for me that I was like, that's not Neo.
The plot was weird. It was really weird how
it's very meta, if I remember right.
Yeah,
like very very meta.
They were killed, but they're reborn, like reincarnate.
Yeah.
It was a weird deal.
Fourth wall. Yeah.
I wasn't a big fan, and I'll be honest with you. Like, is it time to say that the Matrix franchise is overrated? As a franchise, take the first one out.
Shit, when I was growing up, like the Matrix was the shit.
The first one is one of the greatest action movies ever made.
See, I loved the second one when he started fucking flying around, but I will say it's because it paired. There was 2 video games that came out that were like fucking super cool. At least I thought they were cool. One was you were playing as Jada Pinkett Smith's character, and then the Asian dude. And then there was another one that was called like Matrix, like the One, or like Neo the One, and you finally got to be him, and you had basically like Superman powers. And those games with those movies together, I thought they were amazing. It's been a long time since I've watched them though, so there is a very good chance that the whole franchise itself could be overrated.
I don't know.
It's been a minute.
The first one's great, and then after that, it was just progressively worse. I don't know. Anyway, apparently they're making a 5th one, and they're moving on, and I don't know how I want to feel about it. So, kind of wait and see. I don't know. It's almost to the point where, do you want them to bring Keanu back? Like, has the ship sailed with Neo? What do you do here?
Well, that's kind of what the last movie I thought was like. Okay, we're getting a Matrix again. It's cool, and we're getting Keanu back. And then, like, after watching it, you're like, huh? Like, that was kind of what? I don't know if I liked that. I don't think I did. I don't think I care to see any more of that. So, but the concept of the the idea of the franchise and like living in the Matrix. The first movie was cool because they didn't get to a point where like the Matrix was breaking down and like everyone starts turning into Agent Smith. Like, it was cool because you like these were normal people, and then they'd plug into this world where they could like load in guns and load in fucking, outfits and do whatever they want. It's like the concept of being in the Matrix, I think, is cool, but I don't know. Trying to continue the story that is probably not the thing to do.
Yeah, I don't know. Interesting to see how that turns out. But yeah, that's what I had for this week. So
Nice.
And then that takes us into our you need to see this movie of the week. We decided for our anniversary special, we wanted to pick a movie that we both love.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen it in a very long time. And I can't believe I hadn't after I watched it again. And it was just brought up a lot recently. We've talked about this movie several times for multiple reasons, but the 2001 medieval action
movie.
Let's say action comedy.
Feels like a sports movie.
It does feel like a sports movie. A Knight's Tale.
Mm.
So A Knight's Tale came out in 2001, distributed and produced by Columbia Pictures. It is written and directed by Brian Helgeland, which I had forgotten. Brian Helgeland is most famous for winning an Oscar for writing the script for LA Confidential. He also wrote the screenplay for Mystic River.
Yes.
And he's also directed several movies.
What an eclectic individual that
he's a heck of a storyteller. He really is. And then obviously starring Heath Ledger as William Thatcher, otherwise known as Count Ulrich von Liechtenstein.
Liechtenstein.
And then Rufus Sewell plays Count Adhemar of Anjou.
God,
he's a bad guy.
What if there are a few people in movies that were like, they will forever just be known as the perfect bad guy. He is one of them in this movie.
Looks like a bad guy.
Yeah.
Always.
Him and the bad guy from the Titanic. Like, they'll never outlive anything.
Billy Zane?
Yeah, I love him as the Phantom, but he to the general public, he will never be known as anything other than the bad guy. So
right. And then Mark Addy as Roland, Alan Tudyk as Watt, Paul Bettany as Geoffrey Chaucer, the fictional / real character, because Geoffrey Chaucer is a real person. We'll talk about that. Shannon Sossamon as Jocelyn, Laura Fraser as Kate the blacksmith, and James Purefoy as Sir Colville, otherwise known as Edward the Black Prince of England, Wales. Boy, man, I had not seen this in a while. What an awesome movie.
What a fucking great movie. It's like there are times when there's just like a perfect storm of everything to make a great movie, and this is one of them. Like, the concept we've talked about on a couple episodes ago, like, super cool, like jousting movie that it's more of like a modern, like, sports vibe. Like, We Will Rock You was in the trailer. Like, the trailer itself,
the opening scene as We Will Rock You.
Yeah, the opening scene is amazing. It's like, obviously the actors are great. Heath Ledger is dynamite as the lead in this, and it's so fun and so funny and so heartwarming at the end, right? Like, does a great job of being funny and goofy and cool, but then like has like a great serious wind up at the end. I love it. Fucking love this movie.
I do too. It's great. So a couple things about it, like it obviously came out in 2001. We talked about that. It's loosely based on an actual story known as The Knight's Tale, which was in Canterbury Tales, which was written by Geoffrey Chaucer. And so they talked about how there was a time period where Geoffrey Chaucer was like, it was unknown about his whereabouts for like 6 months when it was believed he was writing Canterbury Tales. And so Brian Helgeland said that he wrote like this movie took place in the 6 months where Geoffrey Chaucer had disappeared. So I thought that was kind of funny as a way to do it. So.
Which was like where he showed up, like walking down the road, like buck ass naked, like
the naked guy.
Something happened that set him on this path for 6 months where he was going to be nowhere. So
Yeah, exactly. But you're dead right. Like this movie's hilarious. It's very heartwarming. We've got great comedy from basically Roland and Watt, who are our like squires to Heath Ledger's knight. And like Alan Tudyk, I think is hilarious and just about everything he does.
Steve the Pirate is just fucking great. He's so fucking great.
Yeah, Steve the Pirate. And some of the lines like, "You're just a man with a stick," you know, when Heath Ledger's like kind of having a squabble with Jocelyn. "It's called a lance."
That's called a lance. Hello.
Hello.
It's fucking classic.
Yeah,
The-
it's good. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like the amount of like one-liners from this are fucking great. Watching it again, I mean, I've seen this movie a million times, but typically when I see it, it's not like, all right, I'm gonna sit down and watch A Knight's Tale. It's like, all right, A Knight's Tale was on TV, and I'm gonna just turn it on and finish it wherever it was. There was a lot of things that like I never really picked up on, like when I was younger watching the movie. That like I thought were like a cool take, and essentially this whole movie is him pretending to be a knight, because you have to be a knight to be able to be a part of the tournament, these tournaments. And so like he's pretending to be a knight, and him and his buddies are basically like faking it till they make it through every single tournament. And there's the moment where they're prepping, or they find out that they're going to stay for like a ball or like a festival, a dance after. And when Jocelyn's like personal assistant goes to ask them like Milady wants to know what colors you're wearing so we could match, and he's looking at the what's the Game of Thrones guy.
Mark Addy.
Yes.
Yeah. Roland.
Yes, Roland. He's like looking at the tent behind her, and he's like, it's gonna be like a light green with wooden toggles, because that's what he's like, all right, I gotta make him a tunic tonight, and it's gonna be out of our tent. Like, I don't know, that little thing I never really picked up on when I was younger.
Right.
And, like, I just thought that was fucking hilarious.
Yeah. So basically it starts out right at the beginning. Like the first scene is Roland, Watt, and then obviously William. They all squire for a knight named Sir Ector. And Sir Ector he's in the middle of a jousting tournament, and he dies. Like he's just he dies. And it's funny, they're like plugging their noses because he smells so bad, and he's like laying on the bank of the river, and they're like, yeah, he's dead. What are we gonna do? We're gonna have to forfeit. And they're talking about how they hadn't eaten, they need to get paid, like they got to do something. And he's like, all we got to do is not fall off the horse and we'll win. So Heath Ledger's like, I'll put the suit on. I'll go out there, not die, and we'll win, and we'll get some money. And then that kind of gets the whole movie started, where he's like, we can do this, guys. Like, he basically holds their money hostage and is like, no, we're going to do this. We're going to train. We got a tournament in a month. We can do this. I know I'm good at this stuff. So, and then they happen to bump into Chaucer, who's naked, walking down the road, and they're like, oh, he's a writer. He can basically, I don't remember what it's called, but he can write their fake lineage papers to say that he's a knight. And then that kind of starts the whole, like, he just keeps going, it's getting better. He's winning these tournaments, and, kind of gets that ball rolling. So
I think that's such an interesting thing they put in this movie. I mean, obviously it's very pertinent to the overall story of like him faking, pretending to be a knight, so he's got to be able to prove that he was. But like that was a real thing back in medieval times, of like they would, like, for these types of events, they would literally bring like paperwork to show like the lineage and bloodline and background that proves that they are, of noble blood or birth. So I thought that was kind of cool and interesting.
Yeah, that's neat. And then we talked about Paul Bettany's Geoffrey Chaucer, who's in The Naked Man, and it turns out he He's a horrible gambling addiction is why he is naked. He literally loses he loses the clothes off his back. But he writes the papers for him. They go into their first tournament. He does very well. He doesn't end up winning. He loses to old Count Adamar, right? And this kind of starts the plot line of the movie where Count Adamar is this adversary. He's a big dickhead, basically. They are both pining after the same woman, Jocelyn. She's way more interested in William, or Count Auric von Liechtenstein, which is the made-up name for Sir Auric. Sir Auric. She's way more into him. He's trying to woo her. Meanwhile, Count Adamar's jealous, and he's also just a big asshole.
He's a big Mick dickhead is what he is.
There you go. And he goes off to like war while Count Auric is still competing in these tournaments. And basically the main plot of the movie is different things happen along the way. He's very successful. He starts winning all these tournaments. They meet Kate's character. Kate's a blacksmith. She makes him new armor, whereas no other blacksmiths would help him because they wouldn't do it and get paid later. She offers to help fix his armor, and then she makes him new armor. But she wants to ride with him because she wants to go to Paris, which they know they're going to be down the road. They're going to be there.
And it's cool because she the whole movie feels like this group of ragtag friends or, thrown together group of people are like taking this jousting world by storm in their own like never been done before type of way. So like when they bring on her as the blacksmith, like they think she's crazy because she's like, I'm going to make you like lighter armor that's so you can move, which is not usually what they do. Usually they're in heavy, can't move, like basically stuck heavy ass armor. And then I always, as a kid, I always thought it was cool, the little double Nike sign. She like puts a little Nike sign on his armor, which just, again, like the whole movie when the trailer dropped, it felt like this was a medieval times movie that they're like modernizing.
They call it anachronism, and they talk about it in a lot of the reviews because they wrote this very purposeful to like incorporate modern. Well, it's more 70s music, but anachronism is the act of something that's completely out of place in the plot line of a time period. And the example would be like if you saw a caveman in his cave microwaving a TV dinner, right? Like that's what anachronism is. And that's what this movie does, is it incorporates, especially with the music, like the scene where he wears the green tunic to the ball. They do their fancy 14th century dancing, and then it turns into David Bowie's golden years, and they're all freaking jiving on the floor.
What a fucking scene.
There's
awesome. So many like memorable scenes from this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. So while they're competing, to get back to the story, like while he's competing, he runs into Sir Coville. And Sir Coville, he basically Sir Coville's hurt, right? And they're in their tournament, and he approaches William and he says, I've never withdrew before. I would like to go with my dignity. And so Heath Ledger agrees, William agrees, and they call it a draw. And then he withdraws after, so Heath Ledger can advance. Well, it turns out Sir Coville is actually Edward, the Black Prince of Wales, the son of the king. And Heath Ledger's the only one that will joust him. Everybody else, everybody else is like, nah, I'm not going to joust this guy. Like, he's the prince. What if I accidentally hurt the prince, right? So everybody quits. And Sir Coville was trying to do this incognito. He didn't want anybody to know who he was, right? And then they figure it out, and Heath Ledger's
once they find out he is the royal blood, they're like, oh shit, we've got to forfeit because we can't hurt a royal, family member. And Heath Ledger finds out, and he's like, he puts his own life at risk. Like, they're like, you're putting your life at risk to potentially hurt a royal family member. And he's like, he puts his own life at risk. And then they fucking joust each other and have their little moment. And when I thought that was a cool way of like him gaining the respect of him, was that he's like, wait, you knew that I was pretending that it was me and you still jousted? Like, oh, okay.
Take some guts,
buddy. Yeah. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, it does. Basically, movie moves on. They're very successful. They win all this money. Like, they're winning all these tournaments. But Heath Ledger's got it in his head, like, the only person that's beat him so far is Count Adhemar. And he wants to beat Count Adhemar more than anything. And they come to find out when they get to the end, they're back to London. These are mostly English characters that have been off in Europe with Sir Ector. You find out, there's a couple flashback scenes where you learn, like, Heath Ledger's character, basically his father wanted him to, what did he say? Rewrite your stars. Like that was the term he used, like make your own life. You don't have to be a peasant, right? Like you can earn something. And so when he was a boy, basically his father gave him to Sir Ector, like to give him a chance to maybe do more someday.
Yeah.
So he gets back to London. He had been in London in 12 years. They all, when they're taking the ferry across to London, they find out like he hasn't been there in 12 years. Most of them hadn't been back in years. And he gets back. He's now the superstar, right? Like Count Auric is, everybody roots for him because of the way he jousts. He's fearless. He's fun, all this. And he gets back and he goes back to the poor, where like the poor side of town, talks to a little girl and he asks about, his father, if she knew, if she knew him before he died. And she goes, he still lives there, so it's a cool moment where Heath Ledger finds his dad, who's now blind, but it's pretty neat moment, right?
Oh, it's so powerful.
It's
so powerful when he realizes like, fuck, like my dad's still alive. And then he goes back essentially to tell his dad, like, guess what? Like I went and did it. Like I am a big deal. And like, yeah, there's just a moment where he's talking to his dad who can't see him because he's blind. And he's like, Heath Ledger's character is referring to his son, like as if he knows his son,
right.
But it's very clear that he's like entailing that it's that he is. And just the moment when he realized, like, did he rewrite his stars like we said? And when he says, yeah, like it's so good, it's so powerful, it just really hits you right in the feels. So that's one of my favorite parts of the movie, actually.
It is. It's the best part. It's hard not to get a little verklempt when you watch that part because it is pretty powerful.
What a word. What a word.
But of course, that Mick Dickhead,
fucking Mick Jezebel, has William followed. And of course, he discovers his dad's this non-nobleman. He's been lying the entire time. And he's also tells him that he's talked to Jocelyn's father and he's going to marry her, right? Like he's an ass. And you also find out when he was off at war, they were basically just like burning and pillaging villagers and villages and like just doing horrible things. Yeah, he's a monster. And he wears all black armor with a big black horse, right? Like he's just a bastard. Yeah.
So basically all of Heath Ledger's friends are like, run, man. Like, we got the money. You need to just go. And he's like, I'm not going to run. He's like, I made this choice. I'm going to stay. And everybody's like, no, you need to go. And he's like,
fucking get out of here. They're
even Jocelyn.
Destroy you.
Yeah. Jocelyn's like, you need to run. I'll run with you. I love you at this point. She's like, I'll go too. I don't care. And he's like, oh, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to turn myself in. So he turns in, he gets arrested. He gets put in the stocks. He's sitting there. They're all throwing vegetables at him, all the villagers, because and all of his friends come to protect him, right? Like there's the blacksmith standing there with their hammers, and Mark Addy's got this big stick, and they're all just going to fight off these villagers to leave him alone. And lo and behold, but who shows up?
Mr. Our royal family member guy that we love so much. the guy who was also hiding in these tournaments.
Prince Edward shows up.
Prince Edward,
Prince Edward shows up, and he basically says, let him go. And he respected him for being the only one that would, let him be him. And he said, we're two different people trying to pretend to be something we're not.
Mm-hmm.
And he lets him go and he knights him.
Yeah, he fucking knights him.
And that part's pretty cool too, because it's, he gets,
yeah, he
gets to see it. That's neat.
He's not pretending to be that he's made it. He has made it in name and in action. So, yeah, and then we finally get the fucking like the joust of the joust. There's a couple things I want to back up that we haven't really talked about. Is the love between him and Jocelyn is interesting. The back and forth that they have they clearly have the hots for each other,
right?
But like, there's at one point, so
the Paris joust tournament, yeah.
So there's this tournament where he's been winning everything. So his whole group, they make a deal with these Parisians that they're going to bet like that basically anyone other than a Parisian is going to win this, and isn't going to win. And so they basically bet on Sir Ulrich to win this tournament. They put all of their winnings from every tournament that they've done into one because it's in the bag. He's going to crush them. He's already beat them in every tournament he's been in with before. And then lo and behold, Jocelyn, the Jezebel, leave it to a woman, decides for him to prove his love. He thinks, I need to prove my love. I need to win this tournament for her. She says, no, you need to lose this tournament to prove your love. So then it's like a scene of him going out and getting fucking just his ass beat in these jousts and just completely getting destroyed. He's all beat up and bruised. And then eventually she goes like, okay, you've proven that you'll do like what you will to prove your love. Now go win this tournament. And so then he comes back and says, but like the group, as he's losing, they're like, what are you doing? Like, go! Like, no, we're going to lose all of our like everything. And it's just, it's a great scene.
It is.
I love that. So
it's terrible though. Why? Who would do that?
Yes. Females, the things you do to force us to prove ourselves.
Put him through all that punishment. Just rude.
So, and at one point he gets like, for whatever reason, it's very memorable. His like shoulder gets like dislocated. So they put his arm in like this medieval like contraption that he just holds onto a handle, and they keep twisting it until it like pops his fucking shoulder back in, which is nasty. So, but yeah, I thought that for whatever reason, that's a part that like totally fucking cracks me up. We haven't really talked at all about Chaucer's, like his entrance announcing of Sir Ulrich for every joust that just gets better and better. He's like the world's greatest hype man, essentially, which I guess would probably lead us in one of like the cool, we talked about this new thing we're going to do. I'm going to let you kind of take it this time around for
fun fact or Easter egg, if you will, straight from the horse's mouth, Paul Bettany himself. They filmed this movie in the Czech Republic, mostly with extras that they hired out of Prague that didn't speak English. So the first time he goes out and does this huge hype man speech introducing Heath Ledger's character, Sir Ulrich, and then he, brings the house down and silence because nobody knows a word that he said because none of them speak English. So he said they basically like had to do like applause cards, or get loud. So he's coming out and he's doing this big thing. Nobody understands a word he's saying in the stands. And then they basically have to cue them to erupt into applause, which is hilarious.
It's so funny. Knowing that backstory and then rewatching, I stumbled upon a clip, like a YouTube clip that they were talking about it too, where they're in these tournaments. It's not just jousting. There's like sword, like hand-to-hand sword combat and stuff. And Sir Ulrich is in one of these fights, and freaking he gets his Chaucer gives him his like entrance announcement, and you actually see two of the crowd, like two women kind of in the background. They start celebrating early, like they don't know what he's saying, so they start celebrating. And in the clip, they talk about like that. I keep forgetting fucking Game of Thrones guys.
Mark Addy,
Robert Baratheon,
Roland.
Roland. That like they actually added his moment like into the scene because of that, because they just kind of like an applause card. But like, so he gives this big announcement and no one cheers, and then he goes, "Yeah!" Like, and the rest of the crowd starts cheering. But they said they added that into the movie because of the issues they were running into.
Right.
Basically them not understanding anything that was going on. So they made a funnier part of the movie from it. So
they did.
So anyways, love that. I was in a wedding this past weekend for a good friend of mine, and it was like the coolest group I've ever been a part of for a wedding, because they were all like fucking super nerds, like even nerdier than me in the best of ways. Like, we're talking Dungeons and Dragons. What, Hero Quest? Is that the game that you brought up?
Play with my kids,
like,
yeah.
Yes. So one of them like busted out like Hero Quest. They had dice. They were like, this is one of the coolest games. They were talking about exactly how you did. So I was like, oh, the guy I'm on a podcast with like fucking loves Hero Quest. And then they were like, wait, you have a podcast? And my buddy who was getting married like swooped in and was like, yeah, you guys got to listen to his stuff. It's awesome. Like, they do behind the scenes stuff. They talk about cool things that people didn't know. And he was like, that's my favorite part of your pod, is like for the Batman episode, when you guys are talking about Batman Returns. I didn't know that there was such controversy with like McDonald's, and like that it was supposed to be, they thought it was going to be kid friendly and like pushing toys, and then it ended up being a huge controversial thing. He was like, that's my favorite part about your pod, is when you guys talk about stuff that like I didn't know behind the scenes of the movie. I was like, oh, we just talked about doing that as our new thing, and now here we are. So
yeah. Well, I'll throw in another one then. Paul Bettany said while we were listening to him, this first day on set was the day he was naked. And he's in his trailer and he's ready to come out, and he had never had to do a nude scene in a movie before, because he's still pretty young at that point. He hadn't done a ton of movies.
Yeah.
And wardrobe shows up and gives him a bright yellow sock, and he had no idea. He thought he was going to be out there fully nude in front of everybody. But
he said they brought in a coat hanger with a yellow sock on a coat hanger. And which was funny how he talked about it. He was like, so I was already like nervous and embarrassed and trying to hype myself up, because how weird and awkward it's going to be to go out and walk in front of all of like these people butt naked. And he was like, and then you think how even weirder it is to do that with a yellow sock on your junk. So I just thought that was fucking hilarious.
Hey, no judgment for yellow socks on hangers. So
yes. So it's great. Anyways,
all right. Well, that takes us back to the final battle with old Count Adamar, who decides he's already turned William in for being a fake knight. He's already talked to Jocelyn's dad. He's been raping and pillaging villagers. Like, dude's just so he decides in this last battle, he's going to point his jousts. He's going to point his lances. So he sharpens them into metal points and then puts on, I think it was like a sugar coating, like fake end on it. So that way, the first joust he hits Heath Ledger, he goes right through the armor and stabs him.
Yeah. Which I like, how kind of wild. Well, one, that's fucking terrifying and horrible. But like the last like joust, it comes down to like Heath Ledger has to knock him off his horse to be able to win. And because he had been stabbed and he can't move or lift his arm, he has to do it without armor, or chooses to do it without armor, like no helmet, no armor. And like growing up watching the movie, I didn't think twice about how crazy that is. Of like, all right, this is like a movie, like that's cool, and he wins. But like watching it now, I'm like, this dude could have just easily, pretty much signed his own like suicide note to want to do this. Like, he could very easily could have died from that. So, the quote that Count Adamar says throughout the movie, you have been weighed, you have been measured, and you have been found wanting.
Right.
He says that in the beginning after he had like Heath Ledger has a little bit of back and forth with them, and he says like we're like I'm gonna win, and then after he beats him, Count Adamar beats him, he drops that line of like, not only did I just beat you, but now I'm going to get under your skin for the rest of your life with this line. And at the very end, when he finally knocks Count Adamar off the horse, and he like stops, and there's
he's
a
like
moment
floating in midair.
Yeah, he's floating in the air. Or all of the characters, all the good guy characters, basically come in like looking over the camera at him, saying like that line throughout, and it was just like it's perfect cinema.
It's awesome. Yeah,
it's great.
So then William comes back. He wins the world championship. He humiliated Count Adamar, and him and Jocelyn embrace. And his dad got to see him joust under the name of Sir William. And Chaucer decides he thinks he should write down some of the events that happened to tell a story.
And that's where it comes from.
And that's where you get A Knight's Tale and Canterbury Tales.
That's where
it came. That's where it came from. But
there's a part of the movie where they do writing where he's trying to he had pissed her off. She's no longer like she's upset with him, and he's trying to win her back. And so he's like trying to come up with what to write her for a letter, and all of the group is like coming up with different things to give him, like put this in there, and like just writes this most like epically beautiful poem to where he sends Steve the Pirate off to give her this note, to give her this letter, and she reads it, and it's all lovey-dovey, and she's tearing up, and then he's like, well, what would you like for me to bring back to Sir Ulrich? And she just kind of smiles, and then the camera pans back to him coming back and says to Sir Ulrich, like, she got the letter. He's like, well, what did she say? What did she think? And he was like, she's going to come to the tournament that you asked her to. And he's like, is that it? Is that all you gave him? And then fucking Steve the Pirate looks at him like, God damn it.
He's like looking around like nobody's watching.
Like, this is so embarrassing. And then like kisses Heath Ledger, and Heath Ledger's face is like, it's a great acting moment where he's like, what the fuck are you doing? And he's like, wait a minute. What the? Oh yeah. She kissed. Oh, and he's like, yes, and starts like totally cheering after his buddy just gave him a big smooch on the lips. It's fucking hilarious scene.
The movie's hilarious. It's got romance, it's got action, it's funny, there's drama, it's heartwarming. The music's fantastic. It
kicks ass.
Man, it's a good movie. Like, it's an 8.5. It's great, man. It's a great movie.
It's a 9. That's a 9 movie, because we talked about this thing, and as it's come up, and as we've posted little clips and had comments about it, like this movie clearly resonates with people.
Yeah,
even though nobody is like pulling up A Knight's Tale when they're talking about their top 10 greatest movies ever. Yeah. But when you talk about it, I think the general consensus is people are like, I fucking love A Knight's Tale. It's a great fucking movie. So,
yeah,
9. Give it 9.
I mean, those are both very high scores. You definitely need to see it. Like, it's an awesome movie. If you've never seen A Knight's Tale, like, find it, rent it on Prime Video or something, or watch it on Tubi with ads or something. Yes. I think that's where it's at. So yeah, definitely, it is. Definitely highly recommend. So, and that takes us into my favorite segment. There can be only 5.
Only 5.
Or 10.
Only 10.
Only 10. So for our anniversary special, we're doing the 10 greatest movies we've ever seen.
Wild.
Do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
This list was the hardest thing, giggity, that we've had to do while doing this show, because I have changed my list 100 times.
Ooh.
So you go first. Bring it on.
Okay. All right.
I want you to do that, because then every now and then when you do your list, every now and then I fucking move some things around or add some things to it. So not going to get me Rudy this time.
So I did go through. I knew I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I had 7 movies that I put on my list right away that I knew were going to be on here in some capacity. Then I started looking at greatest movies of all time lists, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which are all over the place. Like, and they're usually like different publications, Rolling Stone, Variety, Empire, all sorts of different publications, different lists, different genres. There were some movies that were way higher up in some lists that I was surprised. There were movies that like I would consider one of my favorite movies, but I never would have thought somebody would consider one of the greatest movies that people had it high up on their list, which I was surprised. Like comic book movies and stuff like that, yeah, they're on some of these lists, which is great. I'm not an old movie fan. There's not a lot. I don't like a lot of old movies. There are old movies I'll watch.
So Ben-Hur is not going to be number 1 for you.
It's not on my list, right? Like my wife's all-time favorite movie is Gone with the Wind. I've seen Gone with the Wind once. I understand why it's considered what it is. It's not my jam, right? I think movies like Wizard of Oz are overrated. I'm just not a huge fan. I've never been a big fan of it. Not to say they're bad movies. It's just not my style. I know that's not on your list. Don't even start with me. And then I ended up coming up with, like I said, a list of, I had 15 movies. So I had to take 5 of them off. I'm not going to say what the 5 are that I left off. I will say they are more genre films. They're more probably the nerdier movies that I had on the list. But all right, now that I've given that preface, here we go. Number 10, I had Inception.
Oh!
It's my favorite Christopher Nolan movie. I think it's a fantastic piece of cinema. It's probably my favorite Hans Zimmer score. I love that movie. The cast is amazing. Cillian Murphy, Leonardo DiCaprio, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Elliot Page, Tom Hardy, like Ken Watanabe. Like the list goes on and on. They're all extremely successful. Fantastic actors. I think almost everybody I just named has an Oscar.
Yeah.
But what a great movie. What an amazing movie. What a cool concept. It's just a ton of fun. And I love it. I love the story. I think it's great. Oh, and oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. There's tons of people in that movie. Anyway.
Yeah. I remember walking out of the movie theater and being like fucking mind blown.
I love it.
From that movie.
Right. At number 9, I had Goodfellas, which is my favorite Martin Scorsese movie. I think it deserved to win all the awards the year it came out. It deserved to be Best Picture. Martin Scorsese deserved to win Best Actor. Ray Liotta's fantastic. Robert De Niro's amazing. Joe Pesci's like off the charts in that movie. It's my favorite mob movie, like straight mob movie, even though there's another one kind of on this list that's a little different. But I love that movie. It's fantastic. At number 8, I had The Contender, which I know you've never seen. I've talked about it briefly with you before. It's a movie starring Joan Allen.
It's politics.
Yep, Jeff Bridges, Gary Oldman, and Christian Slater. It's written and directed by Rod Lurie. It came out in 2000. So basically what it is Jeff Bridges is the president. Something happens to the vice president and he needs to find a replacement. And he chooses Joan Allen's character, which is a senator. The basic premise of the movie is they are like vetting her to be vice president. There's a scandal in her past. The movie is like, is the scandal true? You know, there's Senate hearings, there's private investigators, like trying to find this whole thing out. And it's basically, it's a sexual scandal. And when they ask her about it, she doesn't confirm nor deny that it ever happened because she believes it's none of their business. Like, this is a private sexual encounter, has nothing to do with it. The way this movie unfolds, it's amazing. The character pieces are great. It's my favorite Jeff Bridges role. I think he's fantastic as the president of the United States in it. Like, seriously, he's amazing. Totally good movie. All right. That was number 7. At number 6, I had Moulin Rouge.
Whoa!
I love that movie. Moulin Rouge is number 6.
I fucking love that movie too. Not on my
amazing.
list, but wow.
Moulin Rouge. Baz Luhrmann. The way they use the music in that movie is my favorite part. The soundtrack is killer. The way it's incorporated into the movie, the costume design, the art, the set pieces, Nicole Kidman. I mean, like, you get John Leguizamo, you got old Obi-Wan Kenobi himself, like
old Ewan. I hope you don't mind.
And Ewan McGregor can sing, man. I mean, it's great. So anyway, I'm Moulin Rouge at number 6.
That is shocking. And
I've told you I love that movie before.
It.
I have a poster of that movie in my basement. I've told you I love that movie.
It is a great movie.
It's amazing.
Not arguing.
Amazing. Oh, so number 5. This is the one where I cheated. I have 3 movies at number 5. I have Lord of the Rings at number 5. And I feel like as much as I'm cheating, I'm not, because it's one cohesive story. It's one very long story told over the course of 12 hours and 3 movies in the extended editions. You could make the argument that Lord of the Rings is the greatest piece of cinema in history. And I would not argue with that because of what it is. Mm-hmm. Amazing acting, the set design, the storytelling, like the way you have taken this beloved series of fantasy books and turned it into a masterpiece. 3 movies that were all masterpieces. And you knew after the first one came out, they were all going to be good because he did them all together. Like, you knew it was going to flow. You knew it was going to work. And they did. Some of the most epic battle scenes ever caught on film. It's amazing to think about all these actors that were in this movie that were, I mean, Elijah Wood was the big name in that movie. And look at everybody now. Look who we got. Look at what Vigo did. Look what Orlando did. Carl Urban. Amazing. Anyway, Lord of the Rings.
I love how you took that moment to make sure Carl got his. Yeah,
Carl gets his flowers. Carl needs his flowers. All right, that was at number 5. At number 4, I had L.A. Confidential. L.A. Confidential is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. It's an amazing old Hollywood crime drama starring Kevin Spacey, Guy Pearce, Russell Crowe before he was really in much, James Cromwell, Danny DeVito, like, and Kim Basinger won an Oscar for the movie. Tremendous acting, awesome story. I told the story about how I watched this with Reagan, and she was like, whew, because there's so much going on, and you have to follow the pieces as the crime story unfolds, because there's so much going on in this movie. But it's such a cool story, and it's done so well, and the acting is tremendous. LA Confidential is number 4.
Love it.
At number 3, I had Jaws, the original summer blockbuster movie. I think it's Spielberg's best movie. I think Jaws is an all-time classic. It's one of the best thrillers ever made. Roy Scheider's great. Richard Dreyfuss, Robert Shaw is Quint. Like, it's amazing. The some of the stories in that, the part where Quint's on the boat and he's telling the story about when he was on, I think it was the USS Indianapolis when they were taking the bomb over in World War II. And he talks about everybody going in the water, which is a true story, right? And the sharks in the water, and he tells that story. The fear, the horror of the shark and the shark attacks, and the fact that you don't see the shark until like the end of the movie is crazy. So anyway, all those things.
Single-handedly killed everyone's like love for the ocean for many years.
People were terrified. I mean, like I've talked to like my parents who were like teenagers when that movie came out. Like they didn't want to go swim in a lake. I mean, like they know it just because that's what this movie did. To people back then. So, and number 2, I had A Few Good Men, which I've talked about on here briefly before. A Few Good Men is an amazing film. I love it.
Great movie.
It is. I think it's Rob Reiner did it. Tom Cruise is super young in it. Tom Cruise is amazing in it. Demi Moore is amazing in it. It's got Kevin Pollak, Kevin Bacon, Noah Wiley's in it. Cuba Gooding Jr.'s in it. Just so many famous people in this movie too. And then obviously Jack Nicholson is in the movie for all of like 10 minutes. And it's one of the greatest performances you've ever seen. Like one of the most famous performances you've ever seen in a 10-minute role. So that was number 2. And then my number 1, which I think you already know, the greatest movie I've ever seen. I think it's the greatest movie of all time. Number 1 is The Shawshank Redemption. I could watch that movie 50 times in a row. The acting, the story, the despair and the hope, the terror, like all the so many emotions that get conveyed in this movie. And then at the end, like you have this like overwhelming sense of happiness. And like my favorite scene in that movie is there's the part where they're tarring the roof and they tell the story about how like Morgan Freeman's character Red and all of he gets to pick everybody who gets to do the job, right? Because he made a deal with some of the guards to get his name and all of his buddies' names chosen. And they're up and they're tarring the roof, and Tim Robbins' character Andy overhears like the head guard, who's played by Clancy Brown, who's like the meanest, nastiest SOB in the movie. He hears him talking about how he's got this inheritance and he's worried about all the taxes coming out of it. And Andy overhears, steps in, and says he'll do all the filing paperwork so they don't take any taxes out. But all he wants is for buckets of beers for him and his buddies when they're done tarring the roof to drink so they can feel like Freeman again. And the whole scene where Andy's just sitting there and Morgan Freeman's narrating about how Andy just sat there, didn't even drink a beer, and just was because they felt alive again. I love that movie, and that scene is the best part of it. So anyway.
I love what a great movie The Shawshank Redemption is. Like the whole reveal as it's all starting to unravel for like the warden, and he realizes that I guess the part of the movie where they start to share like what he had been doing, Andy Dufresne had been doing the whole time of like slowly chipping away, slowly dropping rocks into the yard every day, like planning everything. It's fucking great. And then the ending when he meets with Morgan Freeman on the beach, it's like, what a great ending.
Absolutely. I just realized I forgot my number 7 movie. I skipped right over it.
Nice.
I went from 8 to 6. I guess I was so excited to talk about Moulin Rouge. At number 7, I had The Godfather. Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather. I had the first one. I talked about another mobster movie on there. Totally different vibe.
I thought you had another mob movie.
Totally different vibe than Goodfellas. Like, funny story. I was actually in my 30s the first time I saw The Godfather. Like my wife bought it for me. I had never seen it. I'd always wanted to, and I'd never watched The Godfather. And I sat down and watched all of them. And I like got done with the first movie, and I'm like, I feel like I've like a part of my life has been missing because I'd never watched this movie. It's amazing. It's a classic.
I've probably maybe 10 years ago. So 23, whatever. Like I'm a full-grown adult, had never seen the movies.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, it was almost kind of like you were, for whatever reason, the right moment hit that I was like, I've never seen The Godfathers. Like, I'm gonna watch them. And I sat down and I watched them all back to back.
Mm-hmm.
And the exact same thing when I was like, I can't believe I had never seen these masterpieces because they are so fucking good.
There have been older movies. And like I said this at the beginning, like I'm not a big fan of old movies, right? There's a lot of them that I don't understand. There are classics that like I've gone out of my way to watch because I know they're considered some of the greatest movies of all time. And I've watched them and I'm like, I think it's garbage. I think that movie's terrible.
Yeah.
I don't understand how it's supposed to flow. And it's probably because I'm modernized and I grew up watching 80s, 90s movies, right? And like I'll use this one for an example. I watched The French Connection for the first time not that long ago. The classic Best Picture winning Gene Hackman movie. I hated it. I absolutely didn't understand how, like, it's got this horrible, ambiguous ending. Like, it's slow, and not slow in a good way, and not slow in a like we got to figure out who done it way. It's slow in like a boring, like, is this really like how you want us to how the cops did it? And you think this is like a movie? I just don't understand it. And but that kind of line of thinking was always like, I know The Godfather is like supposed to be this great movie, and I'm not gonna watch it. And I finally did, and I was like, oh my god, it's amazing. So
yes,
and I think I like the first one better than the second one, and I know a lot of people think the second one's a better movie. I'm not in that boat. I'm not in that boat. I like the first one better.
I know the world, like, generally is like Godfather 2 is fucking the best.
Yeah.
Godfather 1 is fucking amazing. It's my favorite. And I actually kind of like Godfather 3 more than I like Godfather 2, which is like blasphemy to say, but I actually really like Godfather 3. Watching the whole, like, we basically watched Vito Corleone and his family like go through, you know, from being nothing all the way till fucking
well, it's Michael's story, right? Like, it's Michael's he's out, he doesn't want to end in the family business, and he has to, and then he's like he's his father basically in the third movie, right? Like the way he's kind of turned into that.
Yeah, Michael has taken the family and has grown it so large that he is now like partnering with like the Pope and Vatican, like, which is like a lot larger than what they were doing in the original one. So anyways, love that Godfather little.
Sorry, I can't believe I skipped over
comment.
it, but I had to make sure I mentioned it. But I'm excited to hear your list.
My list is very different. I will say that.
I figured.
This list I could do this list 3 days in a row and it'd be 10 different movies every day, I think, honestly, because there are some days where I'm like, I don't know. When I was looking at this, I've obviously did what we usually do. I checked some other like best movie lists or best movie I've ever seen lists, went on Reddit and just best movie I've ever seen just to look at what people would put as like their number one. And like you, there was a lot of movies that I was like, oh, like I didn't realize that people loved that movie like I did. Love that. I can have that on my list.
Right.
But like, as I was looking at the general, like these are movies that are always ranked in the top, 100 or 10. Like one of my honorable mentions, The Shawshank Redemption. That's like generally listed as the best movie of all time, which I agree that it deserves that or could be in that realm. But I was going for like top 10 best movies that I've ever seen that like are, to me, they're the best movies that I've seen. So even though Shawshank Redemption I have seen, it's not on my list. I've got 2 other honorable mentions. Terminator 2, Judgment Day is up there as one of the best movies of all time to me. Nothing needs to be changed. It's fucking perfect. So, and I'm going to have a lot of movies on this list that you're going to be like, I would never have that in a best movies of all time list.
Nope.
But
when you're done, maybe I'll tell you what my first 5 out were, because I bet that'll, you know, it's a little different.
Okay. I like that. 2 other honorable mentions. I did have tied Batman 89 and The Batman with Robert Pattinson. I love all the Batman movies, obviously, but I didn't want to have them on my list. So, okay. Number 10. And like you said earlier, you cheated with your list. I cheated because I had way too many movies that I could not narrow down. And so I was like, you know what? if there are moments where I feel like there's a tie between movies, I'm going to do it. So number 10, I have a tie between the movie Signs, which is, we've talked about, one of the greatest kind of scary thriller alien movie. It's the greatest alien movie of all time in terms of like aliens invading. Tied with The Gladiator, old Russell Crowe's Ridley Scott epic. I love both of those movies. I could not leave one of them off the list, and I felt like they went together at number 10. So I have a tie. Signs and Gladiator at number 10. I did not do my whole list as ties, by the way. Just there's a couple
20 movies on your top 10 list.
Yes. Well, close. And then number 9, I actually had, and some might call this recency bias, but like as I was going through my list, I was like, what are movies that I walked away and there was like, it had a profound impact on me of like, that was an amazing movie. That was memorable, blah, blah, blah. Like Signs, when I left that theater, I was like, aliens are real and I need fucking glasses of water around me at all times. Like the movie was, it just did that. So number 9, this movie just recently had that kind of effect on me at like 2 a.m. when I walked out. But Dune Part 2, I have is one of the best movies I've ever seen. It's so good. It is so good. It's one of those perfect storm, perfect score, perfect. You know, I'm a Denis Villeneuve guy. And just the cinematography, the acting was incredible. The story was amazing. It's a movie that I know I'm going to watch a million times, which also played a little bit of a role in my list of what are movies that I could fucking put on at any moment and I'm going to watch them. And that's how I got this. Which brings me to number 8 greatest movie of all time, Saving Private Ryan. This is one of like the greatest like war epic movies ever. It's very emotional. It's very realistic. Has one of, if not the like coolest opening scene to a movie ever when they're coming in on the boat for D-Day. Just like insane. And I know it had a huge impact on people when that movie came out. It gave people like PTSD who were former, veterans from World War II. So fucking cool movie. One of those movies that I think I probably watch once a year just because it's so fucking cool. And then that brings me to my number 7 movie on this list, which again, a movie you have not seen, but I hope that one day we shall be watching it together as we have talked about. But I have Lady in the Water. It's Paul Giamatti. It's so good, and I feel bad that I'm putting it on this list and talking about it because I've pre-blown your mind. I don't think you're going to think it is as good as I think it is, but if you get what the movie's going for, this movie is fucking amazing and super original and super cool. So number 7, Lady in the Water. And then this brings me to my number 6 greatest movie I've ever seen. I was kind of shocked to see other people had this on their list as I was going through Reddit as some people's favorite movie ever, because I don't think a lot of people talk about it, but it is an amazing movie. And at number 6, right? We're on 6. Did I say 7? Yeah. I'm at 6. So Lady in the Water was 7. This is number 6. I had The Prestige. Christopher Nolan's The Prestige is the perfect mystery, Victoria era London, Tom Hardy, Hugh Jackman, like just, it's so good. Huge twist, major actors, one of the greatest directors of all time. And it's a super underrated movie in terms of people don't usually talk about that when they bring up Chris Nolan and his movies. Like that's not the first movie people talk about when they really should, because it's fucking incredible.
Right.
And then that brings me to my number 5, which a movie I won't take long to talk about because we've done an episode on it. We've talked about it a million times. It's one of the greatest cyberpunk nerd movies ever. Blade Runner 2049. One of the best movies of all time. Enough said. Watch our episodes. Go watch the movie. It's amazing. Now we get into the nitty gritty. So we're in our technically the top 4 here.
How many movies do you have in your top 4? 17?
No. So I originally was going to do what you had done, where a trilogy would just be one. Like, this is the trilogy. But in my head, I was like, he's probably not going to do that. He said movie, so I'm gonna pick one out of these trilogies that I love so much. But here we go. So at number 4, greatest movie of all time to me, I had Mad Max Fury Road, which I think I just had on a list very recently. Just one of the fucking coolest movies ever. It's insane is the best way to describe Mad Max at number 4. And then at number 3, I have a tie. I've got a tie at number 3 greatest movies of all time. A tie between Chris Nolan's The Dark Knight, Batman, and a 90s classic that I could watch all day, every day, Braveheart. I have 3, a tie between The Dark Knight and Braveheart. I almost didn't have Braveheart on my list, and I went back and I was like, this has to be on my list. It's fucking one of the greatest movies ever. My wife, when I said we were doing this list, she was like, oh, you're going to fucking talk about Braveheart and another movie that I have here soon. But like, my wife knows that that's a movie that I'm fucking obsessed with and nerd out about.
Sure.
We've talked about The Dark Knight, how impactful and amazing that movie was, and just insanely like what it's done for the superhero industry, etc. It's fucking amazing. Dark Knight and Braveheart tied at number 3. I've got another tie here at number 2, a tie between
Shocked.
2 movies.
Can't believe it.
I'm doing my list how I want to do it. My number 1 is not a tie, though. I'll say that. Number 2, I've got a tie between the greatest part 2 movies of all time. Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, / Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back. To me, these are some of, if not the greatest movies of all time. Very close to number 1. The trilogies themselves, obviously, as you said, could be looked at as one story.
Right.
And those could be interchangeable as just Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, tied for number 2 greatest movies of all time for me. Again, like I said, my list was very different. I didn't go the route of like Oppenheimer and, it won all these Oscars. It's like, these are movies that just, to me, like, mind blown. They have affected my life in some way or have nerded out about.
Right.
Number 1, to me, the greatest movie of all time, which when I asked my brother about what I said, we're doing this list, what would be some movies? Him and like 4 other people, this was the first movie that came up, and it was the first movie that I wrote down when I was like, let's do this list. I have Interstellar as my number 1 movie. The score, as you said, Hans Zimmer, just kind of everything that you described. Inception is with this movie, like the group of actors across the board, the setting, the cinematography, the story is very mind bending. As you've probably learned on our 44 episodes of this, I'm like a space nerd. I love me some space sci-fi nerd stuff. And Interstellar, like, it scratches every itch that I have and tickles all of my fancies. So Interstellar, my number 1 ranked movie that I've ever seen of all time. As of today. Subject to change. But that's my list.
All right. I like your list. I do. You're a Nolan super fan.
Yeah, it was hard to continue to go through this with all of the Nolan movies, but these are movies that I love, that I just fucking love. There's
What's
a
your
lot of
list?
Nolan, a lot of Villeneuve, and there was a million movies that I was like, oh, I wanted to leave a lot of these off actually because we've talked about them. Not
Nah,
ad
this
nauseam,
isn't the list you leave stuff off of.
yeah. So some okay, like you said, you had some movies, top 5 movies that I had wrote down that didn't get a mention. I had The Last Samurai. Fucking, I put 300 down, even though I know nobody will think that's a great movie, but I fucking love 300. Obviously, the Ninja Turtles, as you know. Waterworld is one of my favorite movies ever, but we're not doing favorite movies. We're doing best movies of all time.
Right.
What were your 5 that almost made it? That
Terminator,
could have if you tied them like I did.
Terminator 2.
Nice.
The Thing.
Oh, I'm shocked you didn't have that on your list.
It was close.
Moulin Rouge made your list before. LA Confidential made your list before The Thing.
Yeah, like
Thing's one of your favorite movies ever.
It is. But this isn't a favorite movie list.
Shock and awe.
Empire.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
it was almost number 10. The Dark Knight.
Oh, look at that. Okay, so we're kind of similar nerds.
And Avengers Infinity War.
Oh.
That was close.
I agree. I'm glad you said Infinity War, not Endgame, because Infinity War was by far the better movie.
I don't know if I'd say by far, but
if I'm going to go back and watch them, I'm going to watch Infinity War 100 times, and I'll watch Endgame like once.
I want to watch both. It's like one thing.
I don't think I've ever sat down and watched them both through like back to back.
Well, you got to have like 5.5 hours. So,
well, you got to have like 5.5 weeks to watch the entire movie franchise through. So, have you ever done that, by the way?
So,
marathon through all of Marvel?
Not in a row, but like Reagan and I did before Endgame came out. We did one a day.
Fascinating.
For 22 days or whatever before Endgame came out.
That's so, it's crazy to think how many of those movies are out. But
well, yeah, what is it now? Is it 30 yet? It's close if it's not 30.
It's very hard to catch up.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and if you throw the TV shows in too, it's even worse. So
love your list.
Love your list.
You went with more of like these movies are generally regarded as some of the best movies.
This is my list. Like yes, these are my great movies. Like
yeah.
I mean, Shawshank didn't win Best Picture that year, right? LA Confidential didn't win Best Picture that year. Few Good Men didn't win Best Picture that year, right? Like they lost to some good movies, but I think these movies are better. I love them. I'll watch them whenever I can. I like to show people these movies. Yeah. You know, I mean, if you look at my list, every single one of them was nominated for Best Picture. Not very many of them won.
So, you know, our like banter that turned into like a little viral clip of like you saying Forrest Gump was overrated and me being like, it's one of the greatest regarded as one of the best movies ever. Like my sister-in-law, because they were on speakerphone as I was like, I always call Justin like, this is the list that we're doing. Throw me some that you love. And she was like, well, I mean, you got to put Forrest Gump on there. It's regarded as one of the best movies ever. I'm like, that's exactly how I said it. But the guy that I do this pod with disagrees. And she's like, what? Literally everyone loves Forrest Gump. And I was like, that's what I said. So it was interesting to have that. And then we obviously talked about Shawshank and how that was the same year Shawshank came out. And Shawshank is ranked the #1 movie ever by everyone. And it wasn't the best movie or best picture that year because of old Forrest Gump.
No, I'm not going to go back into Forrest Gump, but there were 5 movies. There were 5 movies nominated for Best Picture that year, and it's number 4 or 5.
That's fucking it's hilarious.
It
I
is.
love
Even
it.
and I just watched it again. Like
Yeah.
Shawshank's the best. Pulp Fiction's the second best.
Which that's a movie
I know.
that I just watched for the first time a couple weeks ago, just like your Godfather. I was 33 and was like, all right, I'm going to fucking do Pulp Fiction. And I was mind blown. Great
And
movie.
then I would argue that Quiz Show is a better movie than Forrest Gump. I love Quiz Show. I think it's amazing.
What?
Have you ever seen it?
No.
Exactly. You.
That's
This is
my
like you with.
point.
This is with you with
Why
Pulp
would-
Fiction. Like I've never seen it, so I don't have an opinion. Blah, blah, blah.
But nobody's talking about Quiz Show. No one's saying Lieutenant Dan
No,
ice cream from
no, but-
Quiz Show.
No, but nobody watches that many movies, Kyle. I do.
Yeah, nobody
Casuals
watch-
can keep talking about Forrest Gump all they want. They're
Nobody-
casuals.
People that were in the movie Quiz Show don't even talk about the movie Quiz Show.
Watch it.
Who's in it?
Ray Fiennes, old Voldemort himself, is the main character. John Turturro. I don't remember who hosts the show, but it's good. Fucking pull it up. Man, screw you.
I'm gonna fucking watch this movie, and we're gonna circle back to this.
You
And
won't.
If it's not
'Cause-
fucking better than Forrest Gump. What do you mean I won't? I just
You
watched
won't.
Pulp Fiction while I was watching my kids on my phone. I literally fucking
Oh,
slammed through
Rob
Pulp
Morrow.
Fiction.
Rob Morrow is. It's directed by Robert Redford. Martin Scorsese's in it.
Robert Redford was the director,
Mm-hmm.
and you said Scorsese is in it.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't that be flipped around? Scorsese's directing and Redford's in it.
Nope.
That's an interesting twist of fate there. All right, I'm gonna watch it, but I would say that if we put a vote on this clip, Quiz Show or Forrest Gump, I wonder how many would pick Forrest Gump and not.
Nobody
click
else
Quiz
has seen
Show.
Quiz Show. Nobody's ever
That's
seen
why-
it.
Then you just proved my point, sir.
No, I didn't. You can't have an opinion if you've never seen a movie.
I stand silent. I won't.
I bet
say
Lady in the
anything to
Water
that.
sucks.
I will fucking. I know where you live. I will ruin your day.
Next
sir.
week, episode 45. I can't believe you haven't seen it. Lady in the Water. I'm giving it a 1 already.
Oh wow!
Haven't even seen it. It's a
It's
1.
like when it's like
It's
when
a
you saw
brown
Blade
1.
Runner. Oh my god!
It's a brown
Get out
0.
of here! Get out! I love it. I love it.
All right, that takes us to the end of episode 44 of the Movie Dads podcast, our 1-year anniversary special. The You Need to See This Movie, A Knight's Tale.
Oh, what a classic!
Hopefully you're watching us on YouTube. If you are, click the like and subscribe. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. If you're not watching us on YouTube, hopefully you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Podcast Index. You can also hear some of our short clips and videos on social media at Movie Dads Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. New episodes come out every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Central. We'll be back next week. Lady in the Water. I'm excited to watch it because I've never seen it.
Just have an open mind.
I will
and
have an open mind. I'm not
Just-
closed-minded.
Let it in. Let it in. Yeah, great episode. I had fun. This was
Yeah,
great.
it was fun. It was good. A good list,
see-
too. Cool movies.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I want to watch LA Confidential. I want to watch Quiz Show. And that's I think the
Have you
ones
ever
that
seen
stood out
LA
there.
Confidential?
Yeah, but like
Are
when
you
I was a
sure? Because you
when I
said
was a
yeah to Pulp
child.
Fiction.
Well, I don't think I said yeah. I said like, yeah, I've kind of seen it.
I'm
LA
pretty sure I got that
Confidential
on
I've
tape.
seen like as a kid. I wasn't paying attention.
So you have
but
no
it's
idea what
been-
that movie's about.
I know that there's a lot of twists and turns. That's about as much as I remember. And that they're in like old school suits and stuff. Like I always think like get your newspaper here. Like that kind of like fucking old school LA.
Okay.
anyways, yeah, I'm gonna watch it. I'll watch it. I always watch these things that we talk about that I'm like, okay, this came out 400 years before I was alive. People aren't saying, hey, it's 2024, go watch LA Confidential. But because you suggest it, I will go watch them.
You won't regret it.
Clearly.
All right. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye.